Coming back from a trip, I found my bags in the rain with a note. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Signed, your loving son. Before the taxi arrived, I called the bank. I was the one paying all the bills. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for watching Granny's Voice. Your support means the world to us. Phew. Enjoy our stories, please hit that subscribe button. Tell us in the comments what country you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Today's special shout-out goes to Dora Person from Rocky Mount, USA. Thank you for being part of our family. Now let me tell you everything. I stared at my 3 wet suitcases sitting by the front door, water dripping from their corners. After 10 days visiting my sister in Florida, all I wanted was to collapse in my favorite chair with some hot tea. Instead, I found myself locked out in the pouring rain. Thunder rolled overhead as I picked up the soggy note stuck to my biggest bag. The handwriting was messy, rushed. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your loving son, Michael. My heart sank as I read those words again. I'd lived in this house for 40 years. Michael and I had painted every room together when he was 12. We'd built that treehouse in the backyard. After my husband died 3 years ago, I'd kept everything running smoothly. Michael moved back in with his girlfriend Sarah, and I was happy to have family close again. But I was the one still paying for everything. I grabbed my phone and called the bank before the taxi even left, needing to check what I already knew. Yes, Mrs. Peterson, we show your payment of $2,100 went through yesterday as usual, the nice lady on the phone told me. Thank you, I whispered, hanging up. A big raindrop hit my nose as I stood there, 72 years old, staring at my belongings in the storm. The sky opened up even more, like it was crying with me. I should have seen this coming. The way Michael and Sarah whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. The way they moved my things around without asking. The way they rolled their eyes when I wanted to watch my favorite TV shows. Last month, they painted over the height marks on the kitchen wall where I'd measured Michael as he grew up. It looks old, Sarah had said, scrubbing away 20 years of memories. The garage door was open. Inside, they'd put an old bed against the wall with a tiny table next to it. My clothes were hanging on a metal rack. My photo albums and treasures were stuffed in boxes marked Mom's Things, in Sarah's handwriting. I sat down on that thin mattress, looking at the cold concrete floor under my feet. Through the small window, I could see the house where I'd raised Michael alone after his father left. Where I'd worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. Where I'd stayed up all night when he had fever. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Mom, Sarah needs space for her art room. The garage has everything you need. Don't make this hard. Don't make this hard. Like I was the problem. I'd never been one to cry much, but the tears came then, hot and angry on my cheeks. I thought about all the times I'd helped Michael with his homework. The nights I'd driven him to basketball practice in the rain. The money I'd given him for college when he couldn't get loans. The birthday parties I'd thrown for Sarah even though she barely spoke to me. And now I was just something to hide away in the garage. I didn't answer Michael's text. Instead, I called Betty, my best friend since high school. Rose, what's wrong? She asked right away, hearing the sadness in my voice. I need somewhere to stay, I managed to say, the words feeling like glass in my throat. They've put me in the garage like an old car. Betty didn't ask questions. I'll be there in 15 minutes, she said. As I sat there on that awful mattress, surrounded by boxes of my life, I made a decision. This house had been my heart for 40 years. I put everything I had into it. My love, my money, my dreams. And now they thought they could just push me aside like I didn't matter. The garage door rattled as the rain got harder outside. I looked at my shaking hands and slowly made them into fists. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Michael's mom. I was Rose Peterson, and I was done being treated like I was invisible. Betty's spare room was small, but at least it had a real window and carpet on the floor. After 2 days at a cheap hotel that smelled like old cigarettes, I was grateful to be somewhere that felt safe. You can stay as long as you want, Betty said, bringing me a cup of coffee. Frank and I have plenty of room since our kids moved away. I wrapped my cold hands around the warm cup. Thank you, but this can't be forever. I need to figure out what to do about my house. You mean the house you're paying for? Betty asked, her eyes getting angry. Betty had known me for 50 years. She'd been there when Michael was born, when my husband left, when I struggled to make ends on my own. And unlike my own son, she remembered who I was before I became someone to ignore. I keep thinking about when it all started to change, I said, staring into my coffee. After Frank left, I thought having Michael and Sarah live with me would be nice. We could help each other. And they took advantage, Betty finished for me. The memories came flooding back like a broken dam. 2 years after they moved in, Sarah started changing everything. My suggestions were ignored. My belongings disappeared. You know what Sarah said when I asked where my wedding photos went? Ask Betty. We need to make the house more modern. Old pictures are depressing. As if my entire life was just junk to throw away. Betty reached across the table and took my hand. What about Michael? Surely he stood up for you. I laughed, but it sounded bitter even to me. Michael said I was being difficult. That I needed to accept that things change. My own son chose his girlfriend over his mother. The control had happened so slowly I barely noticed. First, they took over the kitchen, complaining about my cooking. Then came complaints about my TV being too loud, my friends visiting too much, my garden taking up too much space. Each time I gave in, they wanted more. The worst part is I let it happen, I admitted. I kept paying all the bills because I was scared they'd leave me. I wanted to feel needed, to feel loved. Betty squeezed my hand. You are loved. Just not by the people who should love you most. The truth hurt. I'd been buying my place in that house, paying for my son's love one bill at a time. My phone buzzed with another text from Michael. Mom, when are you getting your stuff? Sarah wants to turn the garage into her studio. I showed Betty the message, my hands shaking slightly. That ungrateful little. She stopped herself. Rose, there's something you need to know. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt. But you deserve to know the truth. My stomach felt sick. What is it? Last week at the grocery store, I ran into Sarah. She was talking loud on her phone about selling the house. They want to buy that new place by the lake. The world seemed to spin. They're selling my house. They think it's their house, Betty said gently. And legally, I guess it is. But morally, that's different. I thought of the 40 years of memories in those walls. Michael's first steps in the living room. Christmas mornings by the fireplace. The garden I'd planted when he started school. The bedroom where I'd cried when his father left us. And they were going to sell it all to strangers like it meant nothing. What am I going to do? I whispered. Betty's eyes got hard and determined. First, you're going to stop paying their bills. Let's see how fast their plans change when the money stops coming. But what about my credit score? Second, she continued, you're going to talk to my nephew David. He's a lawyer who helps older people. There has to be something we can do. I'm not that old, I said weakly. Betty raised an eyebrow. You're old enough to deserve respect, which is not what you're getting. She was right. For 3 years, I'd been making myself smaller and quieter to avoid being a burden. And what did it get me? Kicked out of my own home, my things in boxes, treated like I was in the way. As the truth of what was happening hit me, something else grew inside me. A slow, burning anger that felt strange after years of being nice and quiet. Okay, I said, sitting up straighter. Let's talk to David. Betty smiled. That's my girl. Rose, remember who you are. You're not just Michael's mother. You're Rose Peterson. And it's time everyone remembered that. For the first time since finding my suitcases in the rain, I felt something that might have been hope. Or maybe it was anger. Either way, I wasn't giving up without a fight. David, Betty's nephew, didn't look like a lawyer. He wore jeans and a regular shirt, and looked more like a teacher than someone who worked in courts. But his eyes were sharp as he looked at the bills I'd brought. So you've been paying for a house that's not in your name anymore, he said, frowning. And your son and his girlfriend have been living there for free while planning to sell it. Put like that, it sounded crazy even to me. Yes. And they made you sleep in the garage? I nodded, feeling embarrassed. How had I let things get so bad? You have choices, David said. The money you've been paying could be like a contract. At the very least, you could sue to get back all the money you've paid since you gave them the house. Betty, who had been quiet, spoke up. She needs to talk to them first. Make them understand what they've done. David looked doubtful, but I knew Betty was right. Before I took my own son to court, I needed to give him one last chance to do the right thing. That's how I found myself standing on the porch of my own house the next day, my heart beating fast as I rang the doorbell. I'd lived in this house since before Michael was born. Yet here I was, like a stranger needing permission to come in. Sarah answered, looking surprised but trying to smile. Rose, we weren't expecting you. I need to talk to you and Michael, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped back. Of course, come in. The living room looked different again since I'd left. My reading lamp was gone, replaced by some modern thing I'd never seen. The family photos I'd arranged on the shelf had been moved around, with several pictures of my late husband now missing. Michael came out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Mom, what are you doing here? I came to talk about the house, I said. Betty told me you're planning to sell it. They looked at each other, confirming everything. We were going to tell you, Michael said, not looking at me. Once we figured out all the details. Details, I repeated. This was my home for 40 years. Your father and I bought this house. I raised you here. Sarah sighed dramatically. Rose, we understand you have feelings about it, but we need to do what's best for our family now. Your family, I repeated. And what am I? An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Mom, Michael finally said, talking to me like I was a child. You signed the house over to us. We appreciate everything you've done, but it's our house now. We decide what happens to it. I took a deep breath. I've been paying all the bills for the past 3 years. Every month, $2,100 from my account to keep this roof over your heads. Another look between them. They'd known all along. That was your choice, Sarah said coldly. We never asked you to do that. My hands started to shake. I did it to help you because that's what family does. And we're grateful, Michael said, though he didn't sound grateful at all. But that doesn't change anything. The house is ours. So my 40 years here, my money, my place in this family, none of that matters? Michael shrugged, looking uncomfortable but not changing his mind. Mom, you're being dramatic. We can help you find a nice apartment for seniors. I don't need a senior apartment, I snapped. I need my son to show some respect and kindness. Sarah stepped forward, her fake smile tight. Rose, I think you're getting upset. Maybe we should talk about this later. That's when I really knew, that there was no fixing this. The little boy I'd raised, the child I'd loved with everything I had, was gone. In his place was a stranger who saw me as nothing but a problem to solve. I've stopped the automatic payments, I said quietly. Michael's face changed instantly. You what? If you want to sell my home, you'll need to pay for it yourselves. You can't do that, Sarah's voice got high and angry. What about our credit? We have plans. Yes, I said. I hear the lake house is beautiful this time of year. Michael's face got red. Mom, this house was supposed to be mine someday. You know that. It was never really yours anyway. The words hit me like a punch. Never really yours. 40 years of my life dismissed in 5 words. I see, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Well, then I guess there's nothing left to talk about. I turned to leave, my legs shaky underneath me. As I reached the door, I stopped and looked back at the son who no longer saw me as his mother. Your father would be ashamed of you, Michael. And for the first time in my life, so am I. I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. The afternoon air felt cool against my hot face as I walked down the driveway, away from the home that had apparently never been mine. Something had broken inside me today. But something else, something stronger, had been born. "You did what?" Betty asked, her coffee cup stopping halfway to her mouth. "I stopped the payments," I said again, still shocked by my own courage. "I told them if they want to sell the house, they'll need to pay for it themselves." Betty put her cup down with a loud clink. "Well, it's about time." David, who had come over after my confrontation, looked worried. "It's a good first step, but we need to protect you legally. If your name isn't on the house anymore, you could get in trouble for the missed payments without having any rights to the property." The brave feeling that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving room for doubt. "Have I made a terrible mistake?" "No," Betty said firmly. "You've finally stood up for yourself." David tapped his pen on his notebook. "Let's be smart about this. I'm going to call the bank tomorrow, explain what's happening, and see what we can do. In the meantime, you need to find every piece of paper that shows you've been making these payments." I nodded, thinking of all the careful records I'd kept over the years. At least I had those. "What about my things still at the house?" "Yes." Betty squared her shoulders. "I'll go with you to get them. If they give us any trouble, I've still got that baseball bat from our softball league." Despite everything, I found myself laughing. Betty had always been fierce, even back in school when she'd stood up to the bullies who picked on me for wearing second-hand clothes. "I don't know what I'd do without you both," I said, my voice catching. David reached over and patted my hand. "You're not alone in this, Mrs. Peterson. We won't let them take advantage of you anymore." The next morning the phone rang. It was the bank. I answered nervously, expecting questions about the missed payment. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Janet Morris from the loan department. We've received a call about the situation with your property on Oak Street." I gripped the phone tighter. "Yes, that's right. I understand you've been making payments on a house that's no longer in your name. Our records show regular payments from your account for the past 36 months. "Yes," I confirmed, "but I've decided to stop those payments." There was a pause. "Mrs. Peterson, I don't usually do this, but would you be willing to come into the bank to discuss this? I think there might be options you haven't thought about." 2 hours later, I sat across from Janet, a kind woman about my son's age, as she explained something called a financial lien. Basically, by paying the mortgage on a house you don't own, you may have created a legal claim on the property. Hope flickered in my chest. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you could put a hold on the property for the amount you've paid. They couldn't sell it without dealing with that hold first." For the first time since finding my suitcases in the rain, I felt like I had some power back. "There's something else," Janet said, lowering her voice. "Your son called this morning, very upset about the missed payment. He seemed confused about how mortgages work." I wasn't surprised. Michael had always let other people handle money matters. First me, then Sarah. "What did you tell him?" "That missed payments hurt credit scores and could lead to the bank taking the house back," Janet said. "He didn't take it well." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage right now." I showed Janet the message. "What would you like to do, Mrs. Peterson?" she asked. It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me what I wanted in years. What did I want? Not just about the house but about my life. I thought about the confrontation with Michael and Sarah, their casual dismissal of everything I'd done, their assumption that I would keep paying their bills while being treated like garbage. "I want what's rightfully mine," I said, surprising myself with how firm my voice sounded. Janet nodded, respect clear in her expression. "Then let's make that happen." That afternoon, armed with information from Janet and legal advice from David, I took another unexpected step in my new life. Got a job. The help wanted sign in the window of Sunrise Diner had caught my eye as I walked back to Betty's house. "You want to be a waitress?" Betty asked, eyebrows raised when I told her. "I was a waitress in college," I reminded her. "And I need my own money, my own life." I can't hide in your spare room forever. Betty thought about this. Well, Sunrise does make the best pancakes in town. 3 days later I had my first shift. My feet hurt and my back ached by the end of it, but the tips in my pocket were mine, earned by my own hard work. The simple joy of that was something I hadn't felt in years. When I got back to Betty's house, tired but oddly happy, there were 8 missed calls from Michael on my phone. I listened to the first voicemail. Mom, the bank called about the mortgage. They mentioned something about a lien. What are you doing? Call me back right now. I deleted it without listening to the others. For once, Michael would have to wait for my convenience, not the other way around. Betty brought me a glass of lemonade and sat next to me on the porch. How does it feel? She asked softly. I thought about the question, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. It feels like I'm finally waking up, I said. Like I've been sleepwalking since my husband left. And now you're Rose again, Betty finished for me. I nodded, raising my glass in a small toast. To Rose Peterson. It's nice to finally meet her again. After 4 weeks of working at Sunrise Diner, I had found a routine that felt surprisingly good. My tips were small but steady, and the work kept my mind busy. More importantly, I had a purpose again, somewhere to be, people who counted on me, a life that was completely my own. Which is why seeing Michael standing nervously by the cash register sent a shock through me. Mom, he said. His voice softer than I'd heard it in years. Can we talk? Linda, the owner, caught my eye from behind the counter. Take 20 if you need it, Rose. I nodded and led Michael to a corner booth away from my regular customers who had become like friends. You look different, he said, studying me. I smoothed my apron. I am different. Michael shifted uncomfortably. Mom, about the house. I'm not discussing that here, I interrupted. If that's why you came, you're wasting your time. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Sarah and we're in real trouble. The bank called about a lien, and our credit score is dropping because of the missed payments. I looked at my son, his expensive watch, his perfectly styled hair, the subtle smell of cologne that probably cost more than I made in a week at the diner. Everything about him screamed comfort and privilege, a life cushioned by other people's sacrifices. What do you want from me, Michael? He leaned forward. We need you to remove the lien and start making payments again, just until we can sell the house. The sheer nerve of it almost made me laugh. And what do I get in return? We'll make sure you're taken care of, he said, as if offering me a great gift. There's a really nice senior community in Maplewood. Stop, I said, holding up my hand. I'm not interested in being taken care of. I've been taking care of myself and you for years. Mom, be realistic. You can't keep working here. He gestured around the diner like it was beneath me. You're almost 70. 72, I corrected. And I'm doing just fine. Michael's face got hard, his mask of fake concern slipping. Fine. What do you want? Money from the sale. I studied him, this stranger wearing my son's face. I want my home back. He blinked, then laughed nervously. That's impossible. We've already put an offer on the lake house. Not my problem. Michael's expression darkened. It is your problem if you want to see Emma again, if you want any relationship with us. The threat hung in the air between us, ugly and clear. My own son was using my love for his daughter as a weapon against me. Are you threatening to keep Emma away from me? He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but kept going. I'm just saying that families need to support each other. Sarah and I have plans for our future, and you're standing in the way. The way I stood in the way when I paid for your college, or when I watched Emma every weekend so you and Sarah could go out, or when I signed over the house and kept making payments so you could buy that boat last year. Michael flushed red. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. My break was almost over. I slid out of the booth and stood up, straightening my uniform. I need to get back to work. Mom, please. Michael's voice cracked slightly. We need this. The lake house is perfect, We can't lose it. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, looking for me to make everything better. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who saw me as nothing more than a way to get what he wanted. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I need something in writing from you and Sarah first. Meet me at David Wallace's office tomorrow at 3 p.m. Relief washed over Michael's face. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this. As he left, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived at David's office early, my stomach in knots. I'd barely slept, going over and over the decision I'd made in the middle of the night. Michael and Sarah arrived exactly at 3, both dressed like they were going to an important business meeting. Sarah's smile was tight but triumphant as they sat down across from David's desk. Thank you for coming, David began formally. Mrs. Peterson has considered your request about the property on Oak Street. We appreciate that, Sarah interrupted smoothly. We're sure we can reach an agreement that works for everyone. David slid a paper across the desk. This is what Mrs. Peterson proposes. Michael picked it up, reading quickly. His expression went from hopeful to confused to angry in seconds. What is this? He demanded. That, I said calmly, is my condition for removing the lien. I will start making payments again, but the house will be sold to me, not to strangers. Sarah grabbed the paper from Michael's hands. This is ridiculous. You want us to sell you the house for just the remaining mortgage balance. It's worth at least twice that much. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, I replied. 40 years of payments, repairs, and improvements. Michael's face had turned bright red. You can't do this. The house is legally ours. With a lien against it, David pointed out, which makes any sale very complicated. We'll fight this, Sarah said, her voice cold. We'll get our own lawyer. I nodded, having expected this reaction. You can try, but legal fights take time, months, maybe years. Your credit scores will keep getting worse, and that dream house by the lake will go to someone else. The truth of this hit them visibly. Michael and Sarah had overextended themselves, counting on a quick sale of my house to pay for their upgrade. You planned this all along, Michael accused, his voice barely above a whisper. From the moment we made you move to the garage. No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped letting myself be used. Sarah stood up abruptly. We need to discuss this in private. As they stepped outside, David gave me an approving nod. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Peterson. I wasn't so sure. The look of betrayal in Michael's eyes hurt me deeply. Had I become as cold and calculating as they were? Before I could think about it more, the office door opened. Michael and Sarah came back in, faces grim but defeated. We'll accept your offer, Michael said stiffly. But I hope you realize what this means for our relationship. I met my son's gaze steadily. I do. And I hope someday you'll realize what it meant when you put my suitcases out in the rain. The first night back in my house, I couldn't sleep. I walked from room to room, touching familiar walls, tracing the doorframe where we'd marked Michael's height each year, standing in the kitchen where my husband and I had danced on our anniversary before he left us. It had been 4 months since the confrontation in David's office. 4 months of legal paperwork, of tense meetings with Michael and Sarah as they reluctantly moved out, of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The house felt both familiar and strange. Sarah had painted several rooms in trendy colors, removing the warm colors my husband and I had chosen. The kitchen had been updated with sleek, cold appliances. But underneath the surface changes, the heart of the home remained. The creaky board on the stairs, the way morning light came through the window, the slight dip in the hallway floor that we'd never quite fixed. I stood in the master bedroom, now empty except for the bed I'd brought from Betty's house. This room where my husband and I had shared our lives, where he'd packed his bags before leaving, felt sacred somehow. I'm home, I whispered as if he might hear me. The silence that answered wasn't lonely, just peaceful. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The doorbell rang the next morning as I was unpacking my few dishes. I opened it to find Betty holding a casserole and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," she announced, walking past me into the kitchen. "Though I guess it's more like a homecoming." I laughed, following her. "It feels like both, honestly." Betty set her gifts on the counter and turned to look around the kitchen. "Good Lord, what did that woman do to your beautiful wood cabinets?" "Painted them white and changed all the handles to something called brushed gold," I said. "Apparently wood is outdated." Betty snorted. "You know what's outdated? Throwing your boyfriend's mother out in the rain." We both laughed, though the hurt beneath the humor was still fresh. "Have you heard from them?" Betty asked as she helped me unpack. I shook my head. "Not since the closing. Michael made it clear that I'd chosen the house over them." "That's not what happened, and you know it," Betty said firmly. "You chose self-respect. There's a difference." I wasn't sure Michael would ever see it that way, but I had made peace with my decision. The alternative, continuing to let them use me while treating me like I was invisible, was no longer acceptable. "Well," Betty said, opening the wine, "to new beginnings." We clinked glasses and I felt a wave of gratitude for this woman who had stood by me when my own family hadn't. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to my days. Mornings at Sunrise Diner, afternoons spent slowly making the house feel like mine again. I didn't have money to replace all of Sarah's modern updates, but I could add touches that brought back the warmth. Colorful curtains, family photos back on the walls, my husband's books returned to the shelf. One Saturday morning I was planting roses in the front garden when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My heart jumped as Michael stepped out, looking uncertain. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the garden. "The flowers look nice," he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Dad always loved roses," he continued, looking around the yard. "I remember helping him plant them every spring." I brushed dirt from my hands. "What brings you here, Michael?" He shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't get the lake house." I wasn't surprised. Their credit had likely been too damaged by the missed mortgage payments. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it despite everything. Michael looked down at his shoes, expensive sneakers now gathering dust from the garden. "We found a small apartment instead. It's teaching us to appreciate what we have, I guess." I waited, sensing there was more. "Sarah's expecting again," he said finally. "The baby's due in March." "Congratulations," I said softly, wondering if this news was meant to hurt me, to remind me of what I'd be missing. Michael met my eyes for the first time. "Emma asks about you. She doesn't understand why we don't visit Grandma Rose anymore." A sharp, sweet pain went through my heart. I missed my granddaughter terribly. "She's welcome here any time," I said. "So are you." Michael nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened." I held my breath, not daring to hope for real understanding. "I'm not saying we handled things perfectly," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "But you chose a house over your family. I don't know if I can forgive that." My brief hope deflated. He still didn't see it. "I didn't choose a house, Michael," I said quietly. "I chose not to disappear. There's a difference." He frowned, clearly not agreeing. "Anyway, I thought you should know about the baby. And maybe Emma could visit sometimes if that's okay." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was a small opening, a tiny crack in the wall between us. "I'd like that," I said. After Michael left, I sat on the porch swing, thinking about our conversation. The relationship with my son was damaged, maybe beyond repair. He still couldn't see how deeply he had hurt me, how completely he had betrayed my trust. But he had come today, had reached out however poorly. It was a beginning, not an ending. That evening, Betty and Frank came over, along with Linda from the diner and David and his wife. We sat in my backyard, the same yard where I'd taught Michael to ride his bike, where my husband and I had barbecued on summer evenings, where life had unfolded in all its messy beauty. As darkness settled around us, conversation flowing easily among these people who had become my chosen family, I felt a deep sense of peace wash over me. A toast, Betty declared, raising her glass. To Rose Peterson, who reminds us all that it's never too late to take back your life. Everyone clinked glasses, smiling warmly at me. Later, as the stars came out in the clear summer sky, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of my house. I thought of my husband, of the life we'd tried to build, of the son we'd raised who had somehow lost his way. I thought of the woman I'd become in these past months. Stronger, more determined, unwilling to be pushed aside for anyone's convenience. The house around me wasn't just walls and a roof. It was proof of survival, of strength, of the quiet, unstoppable power of a woman who had finally learned to value herself. I was home not just in this house but in my own life. And for the first time in years, that life stretched before me, full of possibilities that were entirely my own. 3 months later, I was wiping down tables at the diner when I heard a small voice call out, "Grandma Rose." I turned to see Emma running toward me, her arms outstretched. Behind her, Michael stood in the doorway, looking nervous but hopeful. I scooped Emma up in my arms, breathing in her sweet little girl smell. "I missed you so much, sweetheart." "Daddy said you moved to a new house," Emma said, touching my face with her small hands. "Can I see it?" "Of course you can," I said, looking over her head at Michael. "Would you like to come for dinner tomorrow?" Michael nodded, his eyes slightly wet. "We'd like that very much." As I held my granddaughter close, I realized something important. I hadn't just saved my house. Saved myself. And sometimes that's the most important thing you can do. The next evening, as Emma played in the garden while Michael and I watched from the porch, he spoke quietly. "I'm starting to understand what you meant. About not disappearing." I looked at him, this man who was slowly remembering how to be my son. "It took me losing everything to remember who I was," I said. "I hope you never have to learn that lesson." Michael reached over and took my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. For all of it. I don't know how to fix what we broke. We start here," I said simply. "With honesty. With respect. With remembering that love isn't just a word, it's how we treat each other." As Emma's laughter filled the evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete. Not because my family had come back to me, but because I had come back to myself. The rose garden was blooming beautifully, each flower a testament to patience and care, just like the woman who had planted them. A year later, I stood in the same garden, this time with Emma helping me plant new bulbs for next spring. Sarah had surprised everyone by apologizing genuinely, admitting that she'd been threatened by my presence and had handled it terribly. Michael had grown too, learning to see me not as a burden to manage but as a person deserving of love and respect. "Grandma Rose," Emma said, her small hands dirty from the soil, "why do flowers come back every year?" I smiled, thinking of my own journey back to life. "Because they're strong, sweetheart. Even when winter comes and covers them up, they remember who they are underneath. And when it's time, they push through the darkness and bloom again." Emma nodded solemnly, as if she understood perfectly. Maybe she did. That evening, as I prepared dinner for my family in my own kitchen, I reflected on the woman I'd become. The woman who had stood in the rain with her suitcases, broken and discarded, was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who knew her worth, someone who would never again allow herself to be treated as less than she deserved. My phone buzzed with a text from Betty. "How's the family dinner going?" I typed back quickly. "Perfect. Thank you for helping me remember who I am." "You always knew," came her reply. "You just needed to believe it." As I called everyone to dinner, I looked around my home, filled with the sounds of family and laughter and love that was real this time, not bought with payments and sacrifice. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be unloved. Sometimes standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes saying no to being treated badly is the only way to teach people how to treat you well. The rain that had soaked my suitcases that terrible day seemed like a lifetime ago. That woman, desperate and displaced, had found her way home. Not just to a house but to herself. And that, I realized as I watched my son help his daughter wash her hands, as I saw the respect in his eyes that had been missing for so long, was the most important journey of all. The one that led me back to Rose Peterson, a woman worth fighting for, a woman worth loving, a woman worth being. I was finally, completely, beautifully home.